The taxi pulled away, tires crunching across gravel as Jonathan stood in front of the old iron gate. The sign was still there. Oak Hill Preserve, an HOA community. The metal letters had faded since the last time he saw them. Dust clung to the hinges. Nothing had changed, and yet, something felt off. His father had passed nearly 8 months ago, but with work taking him across Europe, Jonathan hadn't returned until now. He stared at the family house, modest, 2-story, painted soft gray with forest green shutters. The grass was trimmed, but lifeless. The windows looked untouched. He carried no expression as he unlocked the front door. Inside, the air was still, covered furniture, sealed cabinets, mail piled in the hallway. Everything exactly where his father left it. He dropped his bags and wandered through each room in silence, stopping occasionally to brush his fingers across photographs and faded frames. The last time they spoke was a video call. His father looked tired, but sharp as ever. There'd been no mention of problems in the neighborhood. By mid-afternoon, Jonathan had cleared out most of the main floor. He moved some boxes into the garage and wheeled the trash bin to the curb. Across the street, an SUV sat idle. The woman inside hadn't moved since he arrived. Her short blonde hair was tucked under a visor, and a clipboard rested against her steering wheel. Jonathan caught her watching him, but she didn't smile. She didn't wave, just wrote something down, rolled up her window, and drove away without a word. Later, while cleaning the back patio, he spotted a man walking his dog near the fence. He called out a greeting, but the man gave only a nod before hurrying off. The next 2 hours were the same. Every neighbor glanced, then disappeared. Nobody asked who he was or welcomed him back. Just before sunset, as Jonathan was adjusting the front door lock, the SUV returned. She stepped out wearing a neatly ironed polo, with a neighborhood crest embroidered on the chest. Her walk was purposeful, eyes scanning the property as if inspecting it for purchase. She stopped at the base of the porch stairs. "You the contractor?" she asked. Double quotes. "No, I live here." She tilted her head slightly. "This home's under watch. It's been unoccupied for months. My name's Jonathan Reese. My father owned this house. He passed last year. I'm his son." She didn't look convinced. "Name's Donna. I'm acting HOA president. You've already got 3 violations. I can see from the street. Just a heads up." Jonathan waited. "You can't leave trash bins visible from the curb overnight. The grass has yellowing spots. We'll need to see improvement within 10 days. And luggage or household items can't be stored in the visible yard area." "I just arrived today," he said calmly. "Well, that's fine," she replied, tapping her pen on the clipboard. "But just because your name's on the deed doesn't mean you're exempt from community standards." She scribbled a note, turned without waiting for a reply, and got back into her SUV. Jonathan watched as she reversed out of the street, stopping at the neighbor's driveway to wave at someone watching from behind a curtain. That window closed. The moment he looked up, he stood there for a while. He hadn't told her anything else. He didn't need to. Not yet. The next morning, the wind carried a chill that hadn't been there the day before. Jonathan stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee from an old ceramic mug, when he noticed something stuck to the front door window. A folded paper flapped lightly with each breeze. He opened the door slowly. The notice was printed on letterhead: Oak Hill Preserve HOA. Courtesy warning. Below, a checklist of violations had been marked in red ink. Improper trash storage. Evidence of neglected landscaping. Unauthorized occupancy under Article 5, Section 12. The bottom of the notice was signed, Donna T., acting president. He stepped out and glanced down the street. No one in sight, but 2 parked cars seemed to idle longer than necessary. He peeled the paper off the glass and folded it into his coat pocket. There was no anger in his expression, only focus. He didn't call the HOA office. He didn't respond at all. Instead, he returned inside and opened his laptop. It took less than 5 minutes to retrieve a password he hadn't used in over a year. By noon, he had quietly begun accessing files that weren't meant for residents' annual reports, leadership, logs, fund transfers, maintenance contracts. He wasn't just looking for rules. He was looking for patterns. But before he could get far, a knock came at the door, louder than necessary. He opened it to find 2 uniformed police officers standing on the porch. "Sir," the first one said, eyes scanning inside, "we received a call about a possible squatter situation. Can we see some ID?" Jonathan stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen table. He retrieved his passport, his driver's license, and a printed copy of the home's deed with the legal inheritance transfer. He placed them in front of the officers without saying a word. They reviewed the papers, exchanged glances, and the tone shifted. "Apologies," the second officer said, scratching his neck. "It looks like everything checks out. Your neighbor reported seeing unfamiliar activity, said the home had been vacant for months." Jonathan offered a half-smile. "It was vacant. I'm back now." The officers nodded, offering a mumbled apology again before stepping off the porch and back toward their cruiser. From the corner of his eye, Jonathan saw the SUV parked 2 houses down. The engine was running. The window rolled up, but he could see her inside, watching everything. He didn't wave. He didn't look away either. That evening, another paper was delivered. Not folded this time, taped neatly across the garage in large font. "You are not in compliance." Below it, photographs of the front yard, a time-stamped image of a slightly ajar trash bin, and a final sentence: "Further violations may result in fines." He sat on the porch steps and read it twice. Around him, porch lights turned off one by one. Curtains twitched. The hum of his neighbors. Televisions muted like the whole street had gone to sleep all at once. He stayed outside long after the streetlights blinked on. His phone remained untouched. The printed violations rested beside him, fluttering with the wind. By the time he rose and walked back inside, the only thought in his mind wasn't about fines or warnings. It was how long she'd been doing this to other people, and how no one had stopped her yet. The neighborhood looked polished from a distance. Perfect hedges, pressure-washed driveways, mailbox flags at the same angle. But the longer Jonathan stayed, the more he noticed the silence beneath it. Conversations stopped when he passed by. Joggers crossed the street to avoid him. Even the delivery drivers lingered at intersections. Never staying long in Oak Hill Preserve, Jonathan began his mornings earlier than before. He wasn't just walking for air, he was observing. He took the long route around the community, making mental notes. Camera boxes on telephone poles blinked with tiny red lights. Decorative garden gnomes doubled as motion sensors. He noticed the pattern. Nearly every home had some form of surveillance, but the only house where footage fed into a shared server was the one with the neatly trimmed hedges, fresh mulch, and an American flag angled perfectly under the porch light. Donna's house. He walked by it slowly, pretending not to notice the blinking red light in the window. Back at his own home, he kept the blinds drawn. He worked from the kitchen table, laptop open, emails filling his inbox. Not work emails, those could wait. These were internal reports. Network access logs, HOA directories, quiet connections no one in the neighborhood knew he had. Jonathan wasn't an ordinary homeowner. He hadn't lied, he was on the deed, legally. But what he hadn't shared, not even with the officers or the neighbors, was that for the last 6 years, he had overseen the compliance and structure audits for thousands of homeowner associations across the country. He didn't advertise it. Most people didn't even know his name. But when board presidents used their power to intimidate, he was the one who eventually showed up quietly, always as a neighbor first. He printed a map of Oak Hill Preserve and pinned it to a corkboard beside the fridge. One by one, he added notes next to each property. Names he picked up from mailboxes. Fines he overheard neighbors mention. Times of day, Donna's SUV made slow rounds. Every pattern reinforced what he already suspected. She wasn't just strict. She was controlling every inch of the street, 3 doors down. A young couple named Marcus and Lainey had just moved in 4 months earlier. Jonathan knocked on their door midweek, carrying a small plant and a smile. They hesitated at first. The door cracked, chains still latched. "I'm not selling anything," Jonathan said. "Just thought I'd say hello. I used to live here. Still do." They let him in after a moment. The house was half furnished. Boxes in the corner. A violation notice on the counter, still sealed. He pointed to it. "You opened that yet?" Marcus shook his head. 3 since we got here. For the dumbest stuff. We were going to paint the shutters, but someone said it wasn't worth it. Lainey added, "We tried to go to a board meeting, but they changed the location last minute." Jonathan nodded. "You're not alone." He left the plant behind. They thanked him, though cautiously. He understood. Fear doesn't disappear just because someone tells you it's safe. As he stepped outside, Donna's SUV was idling again, this time at the stop sign. She didn't get out. She didn't need to. She just sat there long enough to be seen. Jonathan stood still, hands in his pockets. A soft breeze swept through the street. Then he turned and walked away, not back home, but toward the small brick building marked Oak Hill Preserve Community Office. It was time to see what she had hidden. The community office sat tucked between two model homes near the gated entrance, marked windowless, and smaller than Jonathan remembered. The keypad on the door had been upgraded. He waited by the entrance until a groundskeeper exited with a bundle of garden tools. Jonathan nodded, slipped inside before the door shut, and walked the narrow hallway like he belonged there. The interior smelled like printer ink and lemon cleaner. A low humming came from an old HVAC vent above. A receptionist glanced up, eyes narrowing at the sight of someone unfamiliar. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here for the meeting records. HOA. Leadership materials, year-to-date, should be under Community File Code 81-32. She stared for a second too long. "I'm not sure you're authorized to." He reached into his coat and placed a card on the counter. No logo, just his name and title, embossed in clean serif letters. Her posture changed immediately. "I'll get the keys," she muttered, already moving. The records room was colder. Metal shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with file boxes marked by lot numbers and years. Jonathan pulled one marked HOA 2024 meetings and correspondence. Inside, a mess. Pages missing, minutes unsigned, dates inconsistent. In some folders, he found expense reports with no receipts, signed off by initials he didn't recognize. Financial trail was worse. Vendor contracts rewritten mid-year. Duplicate payments. One landscaping company, Greencrest Solutions, had received 7 checks in 8 weeks. Registered owner, D. Taylor. He didn't need a full audit yet. Not here. He took photos, quietly, efficiently, then returned the folders exactly as he found them. On his way out, he passed a bulletin board labeled Community Feedback. Every card was blank. Not a single comment. Not a single question. Just lines of untouched index cards and a pen, tied with string, that had clearly never been used. Back home, Jonathan laid everything out on the dining table. Photos, charts, documents. He didn't print accusations. He printed facts. And he wrote one letter, an invitation to the next HOA board meeting, titled, Independent Oversight Introduction. He delivered each copy himself. Not through the mailbox, not online, but by hand knocking on doors, waiting, and handing them to whoever answered. He didn't push. He didn't explain too much. Just said, "I think it's time we all sat down together." Most neighbors nodded awkwardly. Some didn't speak. But he saw it in their eyes, recognition, the kind that had been buried beneath polite fear. Maybe they didn't know what he was doing, but they knew someone was finally doing something. That night, he sat on the front steps with his coat zipped high and a folder in his lap. Across the street, Donna's SUV didn't idle. Instead, the porch light was on, and the blinds slightly open, watching. He didn't look away. Not this time. A car turned onto the street and parked at the curb. The driver stepped out, young, uncertain, carrying the invitation letter Jonathan had left earlier. "She really runs everything, doesn't she?" the man asked. Jonathan stood slowly, took the letter from his hand, and turned it over. "No," he said, quietly. "She just thinks she does." The neighbor nodded once, then walked back to his car. Jonathan turned back toward his door, knowing that in less than 48 hours, he'd be facing Donna and her board in the one place she believed she had absolute control. And she still had no idea who she was about to argue with. The community clubhouse hadn't changed much since Jonathan was a teenager. Beige paint, soft carpet, one long conference table with 7 chairs and a single crooked lamp overhead. But now, a security camera had been installed in the corner, silent, blinking once every few seconds. Donna arrived early. She wore a navy blazer and carried a thick binder under her arm. Her SUV was parked across 2 spaces, hazard lights flashing even though no one else was around yet. She moved through the building like she owned it, placing name placards on the table, arranging bottled water, and reviewing notes with the 2 remaining board members. Jonathan entered last. No clipboard, no briefcase, just a folder in one hand, and a quiet expression on his face. She didn't greet him. Instead, she cleared her throat and began. "This special session is convened under Article 7 for the purposes of addressing escalating tension and property disputes arising from recent unauthorized occupation of Lot 22. That's your address, correct?" He took a seat opposite her and placed his folder in front of him. I believe this session was called to introduce independent oversight. She narrowed her eyes, flicking through her notes. You are not a recognized officer of this HOA. That's true, he said evenly. But I'm not here as an officer, I'm here as oversight. National oversight. The two board members looked up. One opened his mouth, then closed it again. Donna leaned forward. That's not a real position. Jonathan opened the folder. Inside were signed documents. A charter, agreement, oversight contracts, legal standing under the National Federation of Homeowner Administrations, a private body recognized in 37 states as an enforcement liaison for HOA conduct standards. He let them look, and said nothing. While they did, Donna laughed once, a sharp, nervous sound. So you're some kind of inspector now? No, I'm your replacement. The room went quiet. He slid across a printed ledger. $6,000 to Greencrest Solutions. $5,000 to Blue Peak Security. Both registered to your brother, under two separate addresses. No competitive bidding. No board vote. No service logs. You've also issued fines without proper documentation. In some cases, with no complaint from any neighbor. One of the board members, a man with thin hair and a permanent frown, looked at her. Is that true? Donna's expression didn't break. This is harassment. This meeting is over. No, Jonathan said. It isn't. He pulled out a second sheet. It showed anonymous complaint logs, dozens of them. Residents reporting intimidation, wrongful fines, unrecorded citations, and mysterious lien threats that disappeared. Once payments were made directly to a P.O. box, linked to a private checking account. He slid one final sheet across the table. This is the petition, 28 signatures. That's more than half the neighborhood. Effective tonight, the board is suspended under emergency review. You've been formally removed, pending investigation. Donna stood. You don't have the right. Jonathan stood too, and yet, I'm here. She looked at the board members for support, but neither met her eyes. One picked up the ledger and read quietly. The other gathered his things and stood to leave. As the room emptied, Donna remained, hands still on the back of her chair. Her voice dropped. You think this makes you the hero? They'll hate you next. You'll see. Jonathan gathered his folder and walked toward the door. I didn't come here to be liked. He paused in the doorway and looked back. I came here to clean house. He left her standing there in silence. Outside, three neighbors waited in the parking lot, papers in hand, questions ready. For the first time since arriving, Jonathan saw no curtains drawn, no blinds twitching. People weren't hiding anymore. It didn't take long for the pushback to start. 2 mornings after the emergency session, flyers began appearing on windshields and porch rails. Bold letters. Anonymous sources. Claims that Jonathan was a fraud, an outsider, a corporate plant sent to steal homes. Some included screenshots of out-of-context documents. Others carried vague threats. Warning neighbors they were next if they supported him. Jonathan found one taped to his door printed on glossy stock, tucked into a clear sleeve to protect it from rain. He didn't rip it down. He left it there by noon. The neighborhood group chat, usually silent, was overflowing with messages. Panic, confusion, rumor. Donna had started hosting private updates at her house. Some showed up. Others were too afraid not to. Jonathan didn't respond. He didn't argue. He worked. Within 72 hours, the HOA's internal accounts had been locked pending audit. The management service overseeing Oak Hill Preserve had been placed on temporary hold by their parent firm, citing irregularities in oversight. Then came the restraining order, hand-delivered by a courier. The document accused him of harassment, impersonation, and abuse of authority. Donna claimed he'd illegally accessed financial records and misled homeowners into signing petitions under false pretenses. Jonathan filed his response the same day, backed by documentation, official contracts, signed approvals from the Oversight Council. His legal counsel submitted a full brief. The judge set a hearing date and suspended Donna's order pending review. But the damage wasn't legal, it was social. Neighbors grew distant again. Some wouldn't answer their doors. Children stopped riding bikes past his house. The tension returned, heavier than before. Only a few stood firm. Marcus and Lainey, the young couple. A retired engineer from the South Corner lot. A widowed schoolteacher named Claire, who had once received 12 violations in 4 months and never knew why. Jonathan invited them in. He showed them the real documents. He laid out the numbers, the trail of payments, the pattern of threats. Slowly, Belief returned. Not loud, not fast, but real. One evening, a video surfaced online. Grainy footage from a porch camera. Donna Payne, clipboard in hand, arguing with the homeowner over a seasonal wreath, her voice sharp. The homeowner's voice trembling. She threatened Aline, called their decorations non-compliant and culturally disruptive. Jonathan didn't share the video. He didn't need to. The neighborhood passed it around like wildfire. That same night, a second video leaked footage of her yelling at a delivery driver for using the wrong turnaround. Her voice was caught saying, "I run this place. You don't step here unless I allow it." Jonathan received it in his inbox without a name attached. Someone had recorded it. Someone had been waiting for a moment to act. The next morning, a line formed in front of the community clubhouse. Neighbors with files, with phone screenshots, with written statements. People who had been too scared to speak now wanted to talk. He listened. He took notes. He didn't interrupt. Behind the scenes, Donna tried one last tactic. She filed a formal complaint with the national HOA network, claimed abuse of oversight, overreach, that he was settling personal scores. But the review board had already opened their own file independent of Jonathan. The house of cards was collapsing. She knew it. On the fifth night, he received a message on his phone. No name, just a screenshot of a group text thread. Donna's words, "If I go down, I'll take him with me." Jonathan stared at the message for a long time, because he knew. Now it wasn't just about this neighborhood anymore. She was cornered, and people like her never surrender quietly. The hearing was scheduled for Monday. It was meant to be a quiet procedural review, nothing more than a formality to resolve the restraining order. But by the time Jonathan arrived at the courthouse, a local news van was already parked outside. Antenna extended into the cloudy sky. Inside, Donna was waiting. She wore black this time, like someone attending a funeral. Though it wasn't hers yet. Her attorney sat close, whispering quickly. Her jaw clenched harder with every passing minute. Jonathan didn't speak. He simply handed his folder to his own lawyer, nodded once, and waited. When the judge entered, Donna rose quickly and launched into a prepared statement. She described Jonathan as a hostile actor, accused him of assuming power that was never granted, of misleading homeowners, and of manipulating signatures through coercion. Her voice trembled just enough to sound like fear, but her eyes told a different story. They were calculating. The judge listened, then turned to Jonathan's side. What followed wasn't a rebuttal. It was a timeline. Jonathan's lawyer presented receipts, meeting records, subpoenaed vendor transfers, digital access, logs. They even played a clip from Donna's own private update night, where she admitted to imposing fines for discipline rather than for violations. Then came the petition. 42 signatures. Now more than 2/3 of the neighborhood. Donna tried to interrupt. "I'm being ambushed," she snapped. This was supposed to be a hearing about harassment, about him harassing me. The judge held up a single-page report. "This is the review order from the state's Community Governance Division. They've opened an investigation into the Oak Hill HOA board for misuse of funds, obstruction of process, and unlawful enforcement of private regulations. Your name appears in all 3 allegations." Donna froze. Her lawyer looked down. The room stayed quiet for a full 10 seconds. The judge leaned back. "The restraining order is denied. The complaint is dismissed. And Ms. Taylor, I strongly recommend you retain new counsel." Outside, the news crew waited, but Donna exited through a back hallway. She didn't speak to anyone. No press statement. No camera time. She was gone. That evening, Jonathan received a call from the Regional Housing Association. Donna had resigned her role in Oak Hill and been removed from 4 other advisory boards, connected to communities across the state. What she'd built wasn't local. She'd embedded herself in multiple communities, cycling influence through loopholes and hidden alliances. But now, that structure was collapsing behind her. Still, Jonathan didn't celebrate. He knew better than to believe she was finished. The next day, an anonymous email arrived with a file attachment. No message, no name. The file was a scan of a letter. One Donna had written to another HOA president in a neighboring city. She warned them, said Jonathan was poison, that he was planting seeds of rebellion, and urged them to take control before he spreads. He'd expected it. That evening, Jonathan walked the neighborhood for the first time without eyes watching him. From behind blinds, Claire was outside watering her roses. Marcus and Lainey waved from their porch. A teenager biked past and gave a simple nod, but something deeper had shifted. People weren't just watching anymore. They were waking up. Jonathan stood at the entrance of Oak Hill Preserve and looked back toward the rows of near-identical homes. Peaceful, quiet but not perfect. Then his phone buzzed. Again, another complaint, different state, different HOA, same pattern. He took a breath. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something much larger. It rained the next morning, soft and steady, soaking the pavement and dripping from the hedges like the neighborhood was trying to wash itself clean. Jonathan stood beneath the porch awning, coffee in hand, watching the street he'd helped strip of its silence. Mailboxes no longer carried threats. The community board was filled with real comments, no questions, suggestions, even disagreements. But honest ones. Claire had organized a yard sale. Marcus was petitioning for a dog park. For the first time in a long while, people were doing things together. But Jonathan wasn't unpacking. He loaded his suitcase into the trunk just after sunrise. Left the garage door cracked so the neighbor's cat could find shelter. Taped a final letter to the inside of the clubhouse door detailing the next election process, temporary board leadership, and direct contact for auditing support. He didn't say goodbye. Not because he didn't care, but because this was never where he stayed. As he pulled out of Oak Hill Preserve, the gate opened slowly in front of him, squeaking like it hadn't been used properly in years. On the dashboard, his phone buzzed. He tapped the screen. New message, encrypted. The sender's name was a code he recognized. Someone from the network. Someone who only contacted him when something needed attention. He opened the attachment. It was a video, a homeowner somewhere in Nevada filming a board member screaming at a disabled veteran for parking in front of his own driveway. Another attached image showed a lien notice for leaving a wheelchair ramp unapproved. Same structure. Same fear. Same kind of person in charge. Jonathan pulled over at the next rest stop and set up his laptop on the hood of his car. Within minutes, he was inside the system again, checking board rosters, contract routes, enforcement records. He didn't need a full report yet, just the pattern, just enough to confirm what he already knew. He opened the encrypted directory marked active targets. There were names, many names. Some he'd seen before. Others were new. Some had tried to bury what they'd done with paperwork. Others didn't even bother hiding it. But one stood out. Not Donna. Not one of her known allies. Someone above her. A coordinator. A name buried in 4 separate HOAs across 3 states. Reappearing under variations. Sometimes a treasurer. Sometimes a vendor. Sometimes only as a silent signature authorizing sudden changes to policy. Jonathan stared at the name. It wasn't familiar, but it was real. He flagged the entry, closed the laptop and slid it back into his passenger seat. Rain still fell. Harder now, the kind that blurred the road ahead and made everything feel further away than it really was. He turned the key. Engine rumbled to life. The next neighborhood wasn't on a map. Not the kind anyone printed. But he knew how to find it. Because people, like Donna, weren't rare. They were part of something deeper. A culture of control, hiding behind garden walls and gate codes. Built on fear. Sustained by silence, and now, that silence was breaking. One neighborhood at a time. As Jonathan pulled onto the highway, the Oak Hill sign disappeared into his rearview mirror. He didn't look back. He never did.